I think I'm actually kind of opinionated on this because I think like
Opinionated is
a
good.
lot
This is great.
a lot of like designers kind of see themselves as too much like problem solvers, um, and like that's a good like kind of mind frame to have, but also they tend to forget that they're artists too, right? And like you got into this because you want to make things that are like beautiful and like expressive and whatnot, right? So it's important to like not lose your voice.
But this is the graphic designer panel. We have a great host of people here. I'm Faye. Again, I don't know if you watched my previous panel, but I'm an intern at Invent Global. I do social media and I do a little bit of graphics. And I'm also a student, so I'm kind of in your shoes right now. So I just want to mention off the bat that the greatest part of this panel is that right after it, there are one-on-one sessions that you can request with any of these panelists. You can look at their availability if you go to the mentors tab, and you can request a one-on-one and they can review your portfolio, give you tips on how to market yourself within esports and as a graphic designer. So that would be great if you guys can sign up to Hublot. I know a lot of you guys are on Twitch right now. If you go to our Hublot, and if you register through the Invent Global IGEAS page, you can access all of that. And we'll get on to introductions. So John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's John Williams, just like the Star Wars composer. Everybody calls me Typo, though. I'm the art director for Complexity, and I'm also like a senior lead designer for Paper Crowns.
Good clap. That was a very fun fact about yourself. Thank you.
Oh, do you want me to give a fun fact?
No, it's all right.
I will.
I mean, if you'd like to.
When
But
I was 5, I once broke my collarbone trying to beat the Lion King on Sega Genesis. So that game's really hard. It's not a kid game, just letting you know.
Yeah, physical injuries and everything. Thank you. Monica.
Oh, hi, I'm Monica. I'm the graphic designer at Nude Street Gamers. Yeah. Is that it?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to say any extra if you don't want to. Vincent?
Yeah, I'm Vincent. I'm currently the senior graphic designer at Complexity Gaming, and was previously at Envy for 6 years. Yeah, fun facts. I like drinking. That's a good one.
Good fun fact. Water, right? You're drinking a lot
drinking
of
water. Staying hydrated.
Yeah. Yes. And Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan. I am a graphic designer at Envy. I've only been there for 1 year though, not even a year, like 10 months. So I have a little bit more to learn than Vinny does, but yeah, this is my plan.
Oh, we got a. Oh wow, nice plan. Does he have a name?
Thank you. It does not. It's
that is.
No, I love him a lot, but he has no name.
He looks real healthy. Fun fact is that Vincent designed these overlays on IGEAS right now, so everybody clap for Vincent. Yes.
You did the hard part though, for sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I also not to flex, but I also did a lot of IGEAS stuff. But we got a lot of big names here. Maybe, not the people behind them, but all of the graphics that you see on Nerd Street Gamer, on Envy, Complexity and everything you see, these are the people behind it, which is crazy and great. So hopefully during this panel, we can get to know them a little more and they can give you some insights on how they do their job. First question, pretty simple. I guess I can make this a little more personal. What is the first step towards becoming a professional graphic designer for esports specifically? Or maybe you can talk about your own experiences within esports and how you kind of got started. Question is open to everyone.
I can start, just because I think I've been doing it a long time, so it's easy to remember where I started. I kind of just started with doing kind of freelance on Twitch for the Halo community. Basically, I'd watch a lot of streams as I was a fan of the esport, and they started asking, chat to make them, emotes and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I have a cracked version of Photoshop, and I like to do some artwork and here and there. And yeah, I think it took me 4 hours to make a Master Chief helmet with a beanie on it for an emote. But that was like my first step into making stuff for people. And you get that like reaction from them and how grateful they are that you help them out with something. and I kept just getting further and further into me making stuff for different creators. And then one day, someone from Envy hit me up. His name is Tasmo, Matt Taylor, and he's like, "Hey, can you make some Call of Duty headers for a team called EnvyUs?" And I was like, "I don't watch Call of Duty, but sure," because I was a big Halo kid. And from then, you just kind of keep doing work, right? And after after a while, it just became more and more work, and then they hired me full time. I moved out to North Carolina with the team, and then with the team we moved to Dallas, and yeah, before I knew it, 6 years went by. So, and now I'm over at Complexity. So it's a crazy journey, but it's pretty fun. So I enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll go next. So I went more kind of the classic boomer route. I'm 31. I have a wife, 2 kids, so not quite as young and spry as Vincent. But basically, same thing. I fell in love with the Halo community back whenever they were still like MLG. They had large open events all around the U.S. So I went to a lot of those. I grew up in a small town, so like those were the only kind of things that were local to me. And so going to those and kind of being have my eyes widened to like this whole community that existed that was larger than myself was super cool. And then through the magic of the internet, everybody started playing Xbox Live, and you get on web forums, which probably don't really even exist much today. It's more like Reddit and other means, but people are asking for graphics, either for signatures or similar like team requests, a lot of game battles teams and stuff like that. And then I actually ended up going to school just to kind of appease my parents. You got to get a degree if it's going to be official type of thing, which couldn't be any less true. But ultimately, while I was in school, I got an opportunity to do some T-shirt designs for MLG that sold out at like a Raleigh event, oddly in North Carolina. I swear I'm not paralleling Vincent, but it just kind of happened. And yeah, so then from there, I actually graduated and moved to Dallas and didn't do anything in esports at all. I actually started working in like the church, like a mega church here in DFW, and learned a whole lot through that process. Worked under a great creative director, picked up a lot of stuff with like UI and UX and social design. And then luckily, Envy and Optic and Complexity, all these teams, they kind of just moved our back door. They ended up being here in Frisco and like the McKinney, Dallas area. So just right place, right time with a lot of that stuff. But I would say like a big portion of it is just going to events, like meeting people, in person, and which I understand COVID has been, very tough with that lately. But eventually people will recognize like, oh, I saw you at so-and-so, and what do you do? And they'll eventually ask, and from that kind of just spawns a lot of that just kind of camaraderie, and the requests keep coming, and then before you know it, yeah, like Vincent said, it's been 6 years, and here you are.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's kind of like a slippery slope. You start doing something small.
Yeah.
You start doing something small just as like a passion. You're like, try out Photoshop. Oh, I should, make something just for fun. And then, suddenly these big names are hitting you up, and it has been 6 years.
You're making investor decks, and you're like, what am I doing? This is crazy.
Yeah. I just want to touch on the fact that, John, you said you didn't really start in esports. But you kind of like wormed your way in, I guess. I don't know if anyone else here on this panel has like worked in like non-esports industries, but also did graphic design. Yeah. There's a lot of overlap with transferable skills between the different industries, but obviously esports have a very specific aesthetic. So if anyone has anything to say about like being like a corporate graphic designer versus esports, like how do you play into those different audiences, and what kind of experiences have you had? Monica, you have your
go ahead,
had
Monica.
your hand up before, so
No, I'll let Typo go first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I'll touch on it. Definitely, there are some transferable skills. I mean, obviously, people are still going to wonder if you can open Photoshop at the end of the day, but I would say a lot of like my training throughout school started with Illustrator rather than Photoshop, whereas I think a lot of people in the design community from Call of Duty or Halo or what have you all kind of started in Photoshop. Just because it's a means to an end, it depends on what you're needing to make. A lot of my skills were more like in traditional print at first and like sign making and stuff like that. Like, because in Louisiana, there wasn't really like a ton of design jobs unless you're in major cities where I grew up. So a lot of it was more like signage or car wraps. That was like kind of started to be a really big thing. And then, what's funny is like eventually I ended up working for Optic, and then we get a sponsorship with Nissan, and we have to do a car wrap. Well, I've already done that before, so it wasn't like the end of the world, and I was having to figure it out on the fly. So on occasion, things like that happen. And then I'm not a developer, but I've done a lot of UI UX design, and so I've worked with a lot of teams of developers. Throughout the former, experience at the church. So if somebody comes to me and say, hey, I need a website designed or a mobile app or something, like that ends up being a skill set that I have that, not a lot of other designers. I think a lot of designers that are starting out in the esports community are just seeing like match graphics or headers, and they think like that's all they need to make. But like, as Vincent said, oh no, there's a whole side of it where you might need to know InDesign, or you might need to know how to put together a presentation or a deck or some sort of pitch. Like, all those things are super important and transferable, but I don't think people, it's kind of like the iceberg effect. Like, they only see the tip of it, but there's like so many more things beneath the surface that they need to know.
Yeah, I agree with that. Before this, I was working at a museum, so we did like a bunch of signage and stuff. And then after that, I started working at East Stadium, Arlington.
Mhm.
And then so there, I like transferred those skills where like I did all the signage and stuff at the museum, and then at the stadium, we did a bunch of signage and a bunch of events and stuff. So yeah, it was like super transferable, and like print too. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you kind of like you go from job to job and you pick up a lot of different skills from each one. I used to do design for this medical device company, just like the most boring corporate company ever. I had to do a design pitch and I used 2 colors, and they're like, no, that's too much. But I there's definitely so much to learn about like the basics of graphic design and like the fundamentals of layout and stuff that I feel like a lot of students starting out, like that, you, like John said, you only see the match graphics and the headers, and there's like a specific type of aesthetic. But I feel like as a good graphic designer, you kind of need to have those experiences outside of esports where you build like a library of knowledge beforehand where you can apply yourself even further when you actually get into esports. So another question that popped up that I have on this list is like, how important is building a portfolio versus like, going to school that traditional way and getting a degree? Like, how do you value like a traditional education where you have this piece of paper saying, oh, I can graphic design, versus lots of experience and your portfolio?
I can probably start because I don't have a degree. I went to college for 1 year, and then I just took an opportunity, with Envy and full time with benefits, and I was like, okay, sure, let's try it out. But I think building a portfolio is pretty massive. I mean, obviously, it's more important, I think, to get experience than it is to just kind of make stuff and just hope it's going to be seen. A lot of it does require you kind of getting like jobs, no matter how small they are. I've had a few people ask me, how do they get into esports? And I'm like, well, I think if you have a passion for esports and gaming, you should always work toward that. But at the same time, if there's a job that's in front of you, like, you should probably do that first and then gain that experience and then use that in the field that you're trying to get into. I was recently looking for a new job before I joined Complexity, and the amount of different fields I was looking at was kind of crazy, but almost every single one of them gave me an interview and said they liked what they saw. And the big thing was, like, I almost didn't want to go back into esports because I wanted to see what else was out there. But esports, somehow I came crawling back to it. But I almost joined a sports marketing firm, which was it's adjacent, right? Where it's still sports. I mean, esports is very similar to, marketing for sports teams. Very similar. And so that's what, like, I was more leaning toward, since it's kind of it's a wider span of things to possibly do. But yeah, it's definitely like, it's important to build just your skill set in general, right? Print, digital, seeing how apparel's made. That's like one of the forefront things you can do to improve yourself and become more, I guess, advantageous for a company to hire you, right? So
Mhm. Talking about kind of improving, and then also talking about how companies kind of like what they look for. And you said you recently, well, not recently, 10 months, started at Envy. Could you kind of speak on your experience about like what you've learned so far at Envy, kind of as someone who just started, and also since it was kind of recent, like what they looked for, or what you felt like they looked for when they were shopping around?
Uh, yeah. So like in my short experience at Envy, the kind of like philosophy that I've built up um, is basically the two things that you need to succeed is like just being good at your job, and then also like and also like being lucky is like the second part. Um, so it's like I don't know, and that seems to be like working out pretty well for me. Like I'm still there. I've seen people get let go, and it's like, uh, like left and right.
They
Like
thought it wasn't me.
my friends are disappearing, but I'm still here, and like so like the
Mhm.
philosophy, like it seems to work all right.
Yeah, like you must be doing something right if they haven't let you go yet.
Yeah, I guess so. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I definitely think luck is also a big factor. How you guys have all started out is like, oh, someone approached you, someone saw your stuff and someone approached you. And, there is a balance between like you make so much stuff that someone is bound to see you at some point and like notice your work. But then there also is that aspect of like RNG, like you're like someone saw your graphic online and then they were interested, and that is that kind of luck aspect.
Yeah.
there's a fun fact.
So
I actually hired Dan at Envy because of the work that I saw him do at Esports Stadium under Monica. Um,
oh wow, you guys are all
yeah.
It's weird.
And so yeah, like I saw what he was doing, and I asked her if how he's doing because it looked good, but like visually, but how is he to work with? Is he actually trying to improve? Is he asking questions? Is he doing all this stuff? She's like, yeah, sure, he's doing great, and I mean his work spoke for itself. And as soon as his internship was done at Esports Stadium, I was like trying to get him hired. And I did, right? So, and it was a great fit. I think he's killing it over there. So.
I would say that to the point of luck, like some of it is still make your own luck though. Like for instance, when I moved from a small town in Louisiana to DFW, obviously there's like a really large culture shock. There's a ton of people. There's a ton of opportunity. I think a lot of people right now with the mass influx that's happening kind of to the Frisco area, there's tons of either teams or players or just people in general moving to this area. A lot of people are kind of calling it like the new LA almost. It's kind of weird. But I think like for me, it was still when I moved here, the games that I was into, like I think everybody kind of gets into esports generally based around the titles that they like to play and the players that they like to follow. And for me, that was Halo and that was Gears of War. And at the time that I had graduated and moved this way, like those games were kind of dead. Like there wasn't really anything happening, and things were shifting to Call of Duty, and there was a lot of excitement around like Street Fighter and some fighting games here in DFW. DFW has a really nice like FGC scene, and so for me, it was like just having to kind of question, why am I out at 2 a.m. at this FGC event? Like, I don't know anything about this game. I don't know any of these players, but like, I could tell there's a lot of passion there. Or, I'm not from the COD community, but like, I'm going to this event and I'm gonna, make myself like put myself in a situation to where I can, get a word in or say hello or meet someone or whatever. And like, before you know it, you find yourself at 2 a.m. at the hotel bar taking shots with Scump. Like, it's just weird how that turns out, but it's the truth. So I think like some of it is you got to just kind of put yourself out there. There is a huge luck factor, but you can also kind of make some of your own luck. And then piggybacking off of the question of like what you look for and stuff is for me, like at this point, I don't really care if anyone has a degree. I just want to see their work. I want to see what's really good. And like what I look to hire for is people that aren't going to provide me with the same thing. Like for instance, I don't want to work and have two Vincents on my team because I already have one and he's killer. So like I don't need another person that can do everything that he does. I need somebody that can do what he can't do. Maybe it's Dan or Monica on that team. Maybe it's an illustrator we're looking for, or like a 3D or motion designer or something like that. Someone who's gonna add something to the team that's then going to make our team greater. So I always look to fill those holes, not with people that have alike skills, but that people that are bringing new skills to the table.
Yeah, I really like that, getting the diversity. Like, there will always be a need for graphic design, but it's as an individual, you kind of want to put your own spin on it, or you want to bring something new to the table. So I guess speaking as artists, not to get like too artisty, but like how did you guys kind of find your like flow with like your graphics? Like, are you happy with it? How do you like develop your own artistic style, or like what you like, or just kind of like how do you make your graphic design more personal, or do you try to just like please the company and like what they're asking? Tough question.
I feel like I want Dan to answer this one.
Okay, Dan, you're on the spot.
I think I'm actually kind of opinionated on this because I think like
Opinionated is good. This is great.
A lot of like designers kind of see themselves as too much like problem solvers, and like that's a good like kind of mind frame to have, but also they tend to forget that they're artists too, right? And like you got into this because you want to make things that are like beautiful and like expressive and whatnot, right? So it's important to like not lose your voice just trying to like please like the guy above you or whatever. Like you have to make him happy to get something through, but also when you can like throw in a little spice in there, try to make it as good as you can.
Yeah, I get that. There's definitely sometimes where it's like, okay, you're the artist, you have this vision, but then maybe your higher ups are like, I want this awful idea of a graphic, and they're like, I really want this, but as an artist, you're like, okay, this is gonna look bad, so there definitely is that kind of issue where like, how do you navigate art versus like what's for work? And especially, like if you're freelance and you don't really have like a stake in the company already, it's kind of hard to, say like, I'm the artist, I make the executive decision. But I think it is very important to say like, I am an artist and you got into it for the art. So you kind of have to be stern about like your own voice, because also everything you make ends up in your portfolio as well. So you want to be proud of the things you produce, even if it's for a company. Does anyone else have anything kind of to say on that?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to freelance work, like I always, I've been hired to perform a service and also give my opinion, as a professional in this sense. And so like I always try to, lead and put my best foot forward and be like, hey guys, I really don't think that's a good idea, and at the end of the day, I feel like in that case, the customer's kind of always right, a bit more than maybe these things where, we have more stake in the game in terms of, working at complexity. I want, the things that are coming out from our channels that are representative of the company as a whole. Like, of course, I want those to always be good, and I will fight a lot more, I think, in regards to that. But it really kind of depends. Like a lot of the time, though, I think the freelance client generally takes the advice rather well, and they know that you're only trying to help them present and come up with what's best. So sometimes you do get a more difficult client that makes that a more of an issue, but I would say the majority of the time, at least in my freelancing experience, it's usually that they'll side with me as the artist because, hey, they hired me because I know best. And I haven't really ran into too many where it's been like an absolute nope, that's just it, but yeah, it happens, and it's one of those things that you definitely have to get used to as an artist, because I would definitely say Vincent even has probably had this happen a lot to him, and we all have to navigate it a bit differently, and I think it just takes a lot of time, like in terms of the more of it happens to you, the more you know how to deal with it, and that just comes with repetition and knowledge.
Yeah, there's definitely like that that level of you hired me to do this job, so you need to trust me. And unfortunately, a lot of it, as esports moves in a more corporate direction, there's a lot more voices to please. And so sometimes, you know, they do get bogged down, and your professional expertise sometimes gets like overruled by the greater ask, I guess. And so you kind of have to work around it sometimes, you know, like if that happens, you still have to, you know, kind of roll with the punch and figure out a solution that, you know, sneaks in a little bit of making sure that it looks great, but also hitting all their marks. And
Yeah.
that's something that, you know, if you're working in the esports space, especially nowadays, you will notice that immediately, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of compromise, you know, a little bit for that.
For sure.
Speaking of freelancing and compromising, kind of because everyone watching here are students and they're trying to get into the scene. So a lot of advice kind of leans with like, okay, like take freelance jobs, you know, work off your passion, take smaller jobs. How do you kind of, or if you guys have any experience with this, like, you know, what is your experience with taking those smaller jobs, like pricing yourself where like, you know, you don't want to be underpaid, but you know, it might be the only thing that you have right now, or like, you know, you're kind of working off that passion, so you take a little less pay. So like, how do you guys navigate that, or if you have any experience with like pricing yourself as a graphic designer?
It's difficult, right? Like, because I was working full time for the last 6 years, and I recently started having enough time to do freelance. Um, and I more do it to kind of rekindle that love that I once had for design. Because I think after, you know, working in a very corporate environment and working a lot of hours, you lose some of that passion. At least I did. I don't know how anyone could keep it going that long, but and so doing freelance is like you're able to work on, you know, kind of more fun projects. You're able to pick and choose what you want to work on and the teams you want to work with. And so for me, I only pick projects that I want to work on, and then once I meet that team and, you know, say I continue working with them, it's a decision I make. And so I'm also fortunate to be in a position where I don't have to care too much about what I'm getting paid for freelance stuff. But I don't usually like charge based on like hour. I usually go by project, and for me, it's like I kind of just, you know, throw it up in the air, and I'm like, okay, for me, like this project took this much amount of effort and you know, time off of me, and I try to gauge it in a fair sense of how big that company is, and then how much work it actually was, like, you know, how difficult was the project. So it's tough to, like, you know, I know plenty of people that charge hourly and they do a great job doing it, but yeah, for me, I kind of, it's up in the air a lot, but it's mainly because I choose those projects so particularly.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would say, you know, even though you work for the Dallas Fuel, it's still really easy to get burned out. And ultimately, sorry, dad joke number one. Ultimately, though, like I 100% agree with Vincent. Like after you do something so much, like over and over and over again, it's just so monotonous that taking freelance is a little bit of a breath of fresh air, because it's like, oh, I have to think about this differently. This is like different colors than I normally open up and work with every day. This is a totally different industry I've got to think about. And you can make a lot of really cool parallels maybe to what you do. Because like I'm telling you right now, there are so many talented people, everyone on this panel and others in the esports scene, that when you step out of the esports space and you put your talents, you know, to something else, like in corporate America or something that you would consider boring, like they're blown away. Like a lot of people that are, you know, doing a lot of logo design and 3D work or whatever, like it's so applicable across the board and so many things, and you can charge really good money for that. And I don't think a lot of people know, you know, that they're pricing way too low or whatever. And so like general rule of thumb, I think that lots of designers have heard is like, whatever you're charging, charge double. And if like you still get a lot of clients, double it again, and until you get to a point where like you're not just getting bombarded with requests. But I think to quote like Jessica Hish, she's an illustrator from New York. She had a pretty nice run. She's still around kicking it, but she had like a lot of popular pieces like 10 years ago or so, where she was working for Target and a whole bunch of stuff. Well, she put out a nice thing called The Dark Art of Pricing. And it's so true, because like there are certain gigs you would take that you do for $0. And there's other gigs that you would take that you'd be stupid to not take 100,000 for. And it really just comes down to weighing it out. Like, what are you giving away? What are you agreeing to? Where is it going to be used? I think like that's the biggest one that like kind of kicked me in the teeth was, okay, I'm making a logo or I'm making a typeface or I'm making whatever, and it's going to be used in like a national campaign, but like they can pay per different usages. Like, oh, this is going to appear on a website, or this is going to appear in print, or this is going to appear on the side of a bus. And like all those things come with a price. And I know like that's maybe like really far away from, you know, people that might be listening to this panel right now that are charging $25 for a Twitter header or like $50 for a Twitch pack. But like there's definitely a lot of money in it. And the number one thing I would say, at least if that's you right now, is like, don't charge less. Always charge more, because I think there's a lot of designers that have undercut a ton of people. Like there's been several times, like I'll tell one short story. I got hit up by a company. They're well known. They're a gaming peripherals company. They do like 50 million or so in transactions per year or whatever. They have money. They're down to spend. And I told him I'd do it for like $1,200. And I had another guy in college tell him that he'd do it for $200. And I'm not mad that he told him he'd do it for $200. I'm mad that he didn't tell him he'd do it for $1,000, because he just cost himself like $800. So like, don't undercut because you just want the gig. Like actually still work at a livable wage, because at the end of the day, it's your time, it's your money. And if you're fine making the $200, hey, that's fine. But like, but keep in mind, you could have made $1,000 more. So that's why it's so hard. Like pricing is always going to be kind of the death of you.
Yeah, it's definitely the balance of like knowing how much you're worth and knowing how much you have to pay for rent. But then also, you know, because we still have to pay rent and we have like expenses, but it's also kind of like it is that thing where it's like, oh, let me just say I'll do it for $200 because it's enticing, you know, where you have to learn how to not do that and like price yourself accordingly, because I know a lot of people right now are watching their students, so you know maybe they don't have a mortgage to pay or something. But I think it's really good to get into the habit, even if you're starting small, you know, to really understand like, you know, what is your minimum wage that you would work for, and that is actually worth it.
But also know who's hiring you, because like I said, like the reason I brought up that was like a well-known peripheral company is because that person didn't take the 2 seconds to Google who they were. So he just thought it was some like random person hitting him up for some overlays. And it's like, dude, these guys have money to spend. Like at that point, don't just sell yourself short, you know, and take the quick cash. Like be aware, do the due diligence of figuring that stuff out, and then, you know, put a number out there that you feel is respectable for yourself.
Kind of going off of that, there's a question in chat asking like, I also ask for people's budgets. What are your thoughts on asking for a price range rather than just saying, here's how much I'll do it for?
I've done it both ways. I think if that for whatever reason, companies sometimes don't want to disclose that to you. But again, like me choosing the companies that I want to work with, I've asked them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is our budget." I'm like, "Okay, thank you for being upfront with me." And one example was like one of my friend's companies, and he told me his budget, and I gave him a pretty good deal on it because I was like, I want you guys to succeed the most you can, and this is not a lot of work for me. Like, let's just like make this easy on you, and so you guys can use that to fund something else, right? Or even hire someone else to do some other cool stuff. And so yeah, it definitely varies. Like I think it's company to company though, for sure.
Yeah, some people don't take that question very well. Some people think that you're just kind of being a jerk and like you're asking because you want to get paid more or whatever. I would say it's kind of like the saying where it's like, if you have a $50,000 client versus a $500 client, the $50,000 client's going to pay you like immediately, and the $500 client's going to be a complete pain in the butt. It happens, but like I think as long as you're coming at it with the intentions of like, I need to know this is going to be worth both of our time. Like if you're really trying to, bolster your startup business and you really are looking to do X, Y, Z with that, I don't think that is a question that people should be afraid of. But unfortunately, you don't always get to pick who's on the other end of the phone or what have you. And sometimes they just take that the wrong way.
Yeah, definitely. money can be a touchy subject, especially if the company doesn't want to part with it. Or I know in a lot of experiences where, you know, some people just don't value graphics or, you know, artistic
Oh, yeah.
design as much, where, you know, they'll be like, oh, I could have made this and I would have done it for $20. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have the experience behind it that I do, or stuff like that. So I guess another good question is, have you ever had to deal with people that, you know, don't really value your skill sets or your expertise as much, and like how do you just kind of push away and just be like, okay, I just won't work for you, or you try to make it work? Like, what are some of your experiences on that? Monaco or Dan, if you have anything to say on that.
I'll let Dan go.
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say that Monaco go.
It's okay. Or Vincent, or, you know,
I need to think
just trying to get a birth of experiences.
I think being in the esports world, when you work for players, definitely tread lightly, I guess, because typically when you play video games professionally for your entire life and usually don't work a normal job, you don't value, you know, professional things. Oftentimes, you just know you need something, right? And you don't know what goes into it, or you know how much it should be charged for, and stuff like that. So I've in the past, like way past, I've had, you know, players be like, "Hey, I need this, and I'd make it, and then I'd be like, "Okay, this is like, you know, $100, $50," and they're like, here's 25, and have a nice day. And I'm like, what yeah. So, and then, you know, never work with that player again, and then let people around me know that that's what happened. And so I think that more happens, at least in my experience with players, because I definitely think nowadays, if an org or a company does that to you, it's much easier to let the world know about it, and so they're a little scared about that. But it also kind of depends on who you're working for, right? You kind of have to suss them out a little bit and vet them appropriately to know what you're getting into. So
I would say I've seen a lot of beef on Twitter where people just like share DMs and try to call people out, and especially if it's like a really large influencer. Like, first off, no, 100%, you better be in the right if you're going to do that, because they are an influencer and they have a lot more followers than you, and they will probably end your career if you're wrong. So I've seen a lot of younger artists make that mistake before. So yeah, if you are going to call people out, like, be sure that it's like for certain their problem, not yours. But in general, I wouldn't even go that route. Like, just, yeah, that sounds terrible. But unfortunately, with a lot of things in our industry, you know, do go down on Twitter, you know, in the DMs or what have you. I think Vincent's point's really right. You know, people that have never worked an actual job, but that are players, like, they do sometimes either have a little bit of an ego, or they do not maybe understand, you know, what goes into things, and they're not sure how to price stuff. Some of them are lovely to work with, some of them aren't. But like, if anything, the takeaway is all of us designers talk. We have chats, there, you know, Discord exists, etc. So like, people know who to like stay away from, or etc. So yeah, it's a mixed bag usually, but at least at the end of the day, people generally get an idea of like who to kind of stay away from and who not to work with.
Speaking of that kind of community, like, you guys all know each other. You've hired each other. How do you kind of get into, or how did you personally kind of get into, you know, the social circle of, especially like esports designers? Like, hey, you can get hired and then you'll get it, you'll start to know people, but like, you know, you guys have group chats, I guess. Not to make you guys seem like you're a cult or anything, but like, obviously there's a tight-knit community of designers that you share your experiences. So like, what would you say is like a good piece of advice for someone who like wants to get their foot in the door, like to approach people directly? Yes, Dan.
Twitter.com is pretty good. So like, everybody like in esports, from what I've seen, like, is on Twitter like all the time. So like, I've seen a lot of people succeed just by like having their work exist on the internet, right? And then just like replying to people on Twitter and engaging with everybody that's in the community, and just like like being seen, because like I think all the designers that we've hired at NB have been like just people that we've seen around on Twitter, and that's how we found out about them. And like obviously like their work has to be good or whatever, but like yeah, and this industry seems like it just seems like it's so easy to get in when everybody is on like this one platform that you can just access with the click of a button.
Yeah, like my worst nightmare is definitely if my phone dies on an event and I can't use Twitter. Like, how am I gonna find out where to go get Korean barbecue that night? Like, it's just the worst. But yeah, totally though. You need to have a Twitter account for sure. I would say it's kind of weird because like I don't have like a public Behance or Dribble or website or anything like that. I don't think you necessarily need that, because if you're posting your work to other social media platforms or it ends up on Twitter, like esports will find it. So still the most important thing.
Monica, if you had something to say about this.
I was just gonna say, because everyone in like the design community is also like super friendly on there. Like if they see like, I don't know, someone who designs stuff that's just following, we are like, oh, and it's like, wow.
Yeah, I agree. If you're not a friendly person, then like I don't want to converse with you, you know? So like that's another big part of it too, is just like don't be a jerk. You know, I think that's so simple. But you'd be shocked how many people don't get that at first, and you know they kind of get ran out of the community maybe, and then they have to reinvent themselves with an anime avatar and come back 8 months later. Like whatever the case may be, like just be a nice person, put out good work, and like support those around you. I think we're seeing a lot of that in the NFT space right now. I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but like a lot of the people that are being super successful in that space are all just friends. Like they're all people that are just, you know, it's a circle really, you know, and they're just continuing to pump each other's stuff up and put it out there because they're all super happy that their friends' work is getting a lot of notoriety or what have you.
Yeah, at some point, you know, some people say like the work speaks for himself, but you know, you're kind of attached to the work. And if people, it's a tight-knit community, especially in esports where everyone's on Twitter, you know, they're gonna know if you like kind of suck as a human being. And like, you know, it's a job, and part of the job is networking and being personable and, you know, being good to work with, especially when you're a designer. You know, people want to work with you. It's kind of interactive where, you know, some clients might just be like, okay, here's my request and you make it. But I feel like, you know, a lot of the times, especially if you're working full time for a brand, you know, you want to work with the other people in the company to kind of get across the message that they want. And you're in charge of putting it out there. But, you know, but essentially it's the company's message where you have to be able to work with other people, which I think is a really good lesson for people just starting out, because, you know, a lot of people who, you know, have never worked a real job, I guess, if you want to say, or, you know, they're young and they don't really understand how the industry works. It's kind of hard to get them to understand, like, hey, you have to also be a good person as well, especially in esports and on Twitter.
Yeah, I think it's like I'm a very introverted person, and so when you're working with a team around you, it can be very challenging, and it's important to kind of be self-conscious of that, and like remember that you need to be easy to work with, and friendly enough to where people can come to you and ask for questions, and then have you help them with finding out what they need to be doing, and like all that sort of thing. Like it took me a while to understand that, and then when I did, kind of that clicked in my head, like everything kind of went a lot smoother in my day-to-day work life, and you get definitely noticed more when you're easier to work with, and you definitely can get a lot of benefits out of that. So I definitely recommend, like, even if you're not super social by nature or super the biggest conversationalist, I guess, you have to look past it a little bit and try your best. I think if it's a long week of a lot of work and projects, I might get burnt out by like Wednesday night and have to sleep for like 3 days. But I try my best to keep going and be that kind of person that people can come to and be like, hey, I have this problem. Let's help. Can you help me find a solution? And I've seen a lot of success through that.
I think I've only ever worked.
Unfortunately,
Oh, I was gonna say.
sorry,
I
I was gonna say we're short on time, but please,
Oh, okay.
your last comment. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've only ever worked with one other person, maybe quite as introverted as Vinny, and I'm still trying to figure them out. But ultimately, whenever Complexity told me that they were looking at hiring Vincent, I was super stoked because though I've only met him once or twice here in the DFW space at like events and things pre-COVID, I was a huge fan of a lot of the work that he did and stuff that I'd seen from afar, either respecting from like the outlaw side of things versus that of Fuel. And so, yeah, like the circle's still really small and we all kind of know each other relatively well. And I think like it's one of those things where if you're also maybe stuck on like what to make, like start to look out at the people that are around you and figure out either who's like adjacent to you or like in a similar industry as you. Feel free to be inspired by them or feel free to like look elsewhere, outside of the esports industry for inspiration as well. But yeah, I think like sky's the limit in terms of what you can do. You just have to put the time in and things will work out.
That's great. Great ending. Very motivational. Very wonderful ending. So unfortunately, our panel is coming to a close, but I do want to say again that on our Hublot event platform, these guys are able to, meet with you one-on-one. If you request a session, you can go to the mentees tab on Hublot. You can look them up. You can see their availability. You can talk to them one-on-one. They can, give you more advice or maybe, show them your portfolio and things like that. I think that's a great opportunity to reach out because these guys are great. And I am 1 minute over time. Hopefully my boss does not yell at me. But thank you again, everyone, for watching. And also thank you guys, the panelists, for joining me here. Great conversations. And there were a bunch of questions that were, I was dying to ask and we got the answer. So thank you. Yay.